And we're pleased to welcome back to Telile 24/7 to tell us how Richmond County is handling the snowstorm and the aftermath from the municipal level. We're pleased to welcome Warden Amanda Mombourquette to our airwaves. Thank you for joining us, Warden, on Telile 24/7 today.
Thank you, Adam. It's my pleasure, of course.
Well, we wanted to bring you in partly because we wanted to get a sense of how the county is responding. Some things are happening that some people might expect, other things are happening that might require a little bit more explanation. But first of all, I want to get just your overall impressions of this once in a generation storm, both looking at it from the perspective of the councillor for District 4, but also as the warden for the county. Essentially, what were you seeing when the storm started rolling in and the snow started piling up?
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenging week for all of us here on Cape Breton Island, and Richmond County is no exception. I think things started on Friday. We had lots of advance warning. Have to say, with our weather forecasting, we had lots of really good warning that we're potentially going to be 80 to 100 plus centimeters of snow falling in the span of the 3 or 4 days. And so, kudos to the people who prepared for that. And many did, making sure that they were stocked for, a good, 3 days or so to be unable to get to grocery stores or et cetera. But the reality is that, the snow accumulated so quickly that I think the systems that people have relied on, like whether they have a four-wheeler with a plow or they have, a guy that with a plow truck that comes and clears them out, it just accumulated so quickly and in so many areas that it became impossible to keep up. And that I think took people really off guard. It took me off guard for sure. I've heard from people who said they were every 2 hours outside trying to plow a little bit to try to kind of keep up with it, and then eventually just overwhelmed. So, it's been really hard on people's bodies, really hard on people's gear, the equipment that they're using, and really hard mentally as well, especially for those who have been trapped inside their homes for days on end, right? It's been a really tough week.
The sense I get is that there are still parts of Richmond County and different parts of the county as well too, where there are still people trying to get dug out, even trying to get to their street. Can you talk a little bit about some of the remaining problem areas for Richmond County, both inside and outside of your district, and basically what the county can do at this point to help people in these areas?
Yeah, we did have some really, I guess I would say high intensity issues, and that Dundee West Bay Highway area was definitely one. It took a lot of machinery to punch through there, finally, after days of waiting. The Framboys kind of Sterling Three Rivers area, that they had some challenges out there. Lordways had some challenges around Mackenzie Lane. We heard of Wall Street down towards Roberta area having some challenges. And it was just coming from everywhere, all over the county. We've lived about 2,000 kilometers, a little over 2,000 kilometers of road, I think, here to maintain. So you can imagine the gear that we have in place to manage our regular snowstorms, by Nova Scotia Public Works. It was, it's up to the task of a regular snowstorm, but it is not up to the task of this, like you say, once in a generation type event. So right now, what I heard was a Corbett's Cove. I believe there's a grader in there as we speak. So, hopefully by the end of today, that road will be cleared to 2 lanes. I think that might be the last remaining one, but I would encourage your audience that if they are on a road that is still not cleared, or still, only cleared to 1 lane, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're passing information along. Our EMO is passing that information along, and they're asking us to flag priority areas, and that's what we've been doing as we kind of hear about them. So it's a communication system that's been working, I think, fairly well, given given the pure intensity of the storm. Somebody asked me the other day, earlier this week, so how are you feeling about how the road clearing is going? And I said, well, I guess it depends on who you ask. Overall, when I look at it as the warden of the county, I think it's remarkable that Nova Scotia Public Works has made the progress that they were able to make, given the volume of snow and the constraints that they work within, which is not just about equipment, it's about people. People need to sleep. There's all kinds of challenges around logistically managing all of that. But if I was a person living on a road that hadn't been plowed yet, I would be telling you a whole different story because it's scary, right? When you know that emergency services and the things that you depend on, like you can't get to them, home care services, other types of essential services. So these are things that become very personal very quickly to people, and it impacts people's health and well-being. There's no question. But I think overall, right now, we're in pretty good shape. Like I said, that I think that last road is being cleared. If folks have other information, please share it. And but at this point, I think we're kind of coming out on the other side here, and I'm scared to look at the forecast for next week. So
Yes, our
keeping our fingers
eyebrows are all
crossed.
up for that one. Yes, you're right there. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that's involved in getting the province involved? And this goes beyond
Yeah,
getting Nova Scotia Public Works out there with their various machinery. You've kept us all up to date in terms of the individual problem areas on your various social media feeds, particularly on Facebook. And I remember a post from you saying that there have been requests that have gone in from the municipality to the Provincial Emergency Management
yeah.
Office, to EMO for Nova Scotia. Can you tell us a little bit about that process, but also about where these requests stand right now as we're speaking at just after 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon? Basically, where are we?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, I think, across Cape Breton a cry for we need more help. And that all went through the Provincial Coordination Center, and I think you would have heard the provincial government speak to that. I know that there were several pieces of equipment from other regions, like the kind of the Western Zone, wherever, up here, working in Richmond County specifically, to help us get these roads cleared. I saw a great post from my colleague Mayor Pam Mood down in Yarmouth,
Hmm.
who said help is on the way, and we're sending equipment up and people, and it was a real Nova Scotian response, I have to say. But we also know that through the province, the request went out to the federal government as well for assistance. We're seeing the Coast Guard, cadets and all kinds of folks helping out with the clearing of roads and homes. At the end of the day, could more have been done? Always, there's more that could have been done. I've seen some pretty desperate situations in, for instance, the county of Antigonish recently, right? So, folks who are a quarter of a mile off of a road that's not plowed, and have lived there for generations and are stuck, and no sign of anything, right? So it's been challenging. There's always more we could have done. And I would really encourage, I always encourage our EMO and provincial EMO, like every situation has got to be a learning one. There's a teachable moment in here, and what can we do better next time? We're never going to get it perfect, but I can tell you, this has been quite an event, and I can't say that I can't say enough about the men and women who are driving these pieces of equipment, because what a dangerous and stressful job. They've had accidents during this event. They've gone off the road. It's been a highly, highly stressful situation, low visibility, high winds, extreme amounts of snow. So they have really worked so hard to get us accessible again, and to make sure people were safe. So those calls for help, they were well warranted, and certainly is something that should we need to go down this road in the future, which I'm sure we will. There's climate emergencies are happening. It's definitely not something we're ever going to delay on, because the safety of our residents has to be our priority.
Now, are there any requests from the municipality to provincial EMO that are still outstanding? It seems like a couple of them may have been addressed over the last couple of
Yeah.
days, but what can you tell us about where those requests are at this point and where they actually land geographically?
Yeah, so I think the road clearing requests are pretty much taken care of. We have been coordinating, though, the Provincial Coordination Center, on, if there are folks who may need some wellness checks, so sharing that information with our provincial counterparts, and making sure the local fire departments are aware, to make sure that as quick a response is happening as possible, right? As humanly possible. So we're trying to get, people kind of freed up and safe as quickly as we can. But also important for us, especially with kind of sharing that information with the PCC, important for us to be able to track that data, because we can't learn from these situations if we don't have the data, to fall back on, and to help us, to teach us how we could be doing things better, or, in future, are there additional types of resources that we should have in place? Are there different ways that we could be communicating? So yeah, so I think we're in good shape at this point. But certainly, as I said, we only know about what we're told about sometimes. Although, many of our EMO, what I would call our EMO network. So I would include our coordinator in that. I would include all of our local departments, RCMP, as they're moving through the community, that, and they see issues, they're reporting them. Like about half an hour, ago, I got a report of a person who had not been plowed out yet, and there had been no signs of any movement around the home. And so I reported that through our EMC. This is how we have to do this. We've got to all look out for each other and rely on our emergency network, really, to deal with, not just, I guess, not just people who live kind of in remote areas, but people who are living even sometimes right next door, and you don't realize, because you're so busy in the moment of trying to, clear your driveway and check on your family. And, you have to keep your eyes open for people, and really, really impressed with how our community has been doing that.
The next couple of questions I ask you, and these are questions that you've addressed as well on your Facebook and on your social media, are about why Richmond County didn't go in certain directions to respond to this storm. And one of the biggest ones has to do with a course of action taken by the neighboring municipality, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Mayor Amanda McDougall and her council, calling a local state of emergency there. And I think it might help some of our viewers to understand what a state of emergency would entail and what that would mean for Richmond County. So basically, can you tell us, as you did on your social media feeds, why wasn't a state of emergency called in Richmond County over the snowstorm?
Yeah, so I mean, our situation's a little different. Well, it's quite a lot different than CBRM. First of all, we have a much lower population density, we have a much lower business density, and most of all, this has been an event that has really been about the state of roads. The roads in Richmond County are almost 100%, but maintained by the province of Nova Scotia, which means that the municipality doesn't have any authority to kind of doing, you know, any kind of maintenance. And the reality is we don't have any equipment to do any kind of road maintenance. There's no possibility for us to respond to road clearing for 2,000 kilometers worth of road. We don't have those resources in place, because our roads are provincially owned and maintained. So it's really like comparing apples to oranges. I totally respect Mayor Amanda McDougall, who made that call, and I hope that it certainly helps her community, because God help them, I think they got hit even worse than we did. But at the end of the day, mobilizing our EMO and working with the Provincial Coordination Center and working with our local fire departments, that was the most effective way for us to get things back on track as quickly as possible. So it really is a little bit like comparing apples and oranges, for sure. If the situation had been different and these were our roads to maintain, you and I would be having a totally different conversation.
Yes, yeah, and that's a sense I got as well too. All
Yeah.
right, well that clears that up, Warden Mombourquette. Can you give us a sense now about comfort centers? And I know this has
Mm-hmm.
been an issue that the municipality has been working on with its
Yeah.
emergency services coordinator Stephen Marcellus and various members of council and staff over the last few months. You addressed on your Facebook page as well too the idea that comfort centers are not necessarily the way that the municipality should or could go in the early stages of a storm like this. Could you explain a little bit about what you meant by that?
Yeah. We're really lucky in Richmond County. I mean, it's a big geography. We have over 20 comfort stations that are kind of designated throughout the municipality. I think pretty like almost all of them are run by volunteer organizations. So again, that volunteer network stepping up and keeping each other safe, and working with our local, emergency management office to do so. The reality is the nature of this emergency is that it snowed people in, and it made roads impassable or unsafe to be on. So opening a comfort center at a time like that, it's just not, it's not responsible of us for to do that, and it really is. It would have been practically impossible anyways, because the volunteers who staff, who would come to open those halls or whatever, right? They were stuck as well. Our advisory was to shelter in place during the storm. The storm lasted for 3 days, and that's a long time for a lot of folks to deal with. And I think it brings on some social isolation. It certainly brings on a state of nervousness. Like I was getting really kind of antsy by that third day, kind of, thinking like, well, what if something happens? And what if something happens? And we were really lucky. There's no question in Richmond County, there was a low instance of 911 calls. And so I'm really thankful for that. But at the end of the day, for us to try to open comfort centers while we're advising people to stay off the roads, those two pieces don't really jive. We really needed people to stay off the roads. I mean, we saw cases where people would venture out. I had someone who lives not far from me do that very thing on the Saturday and then end up in the ditch. 911 is being called. We've got fire department, RCMP, paramedics responding, and thank goodness that person was okay, and I'm sure had a very valid reason for venturing out on the road. But at the end of the day, it puts a lot of other folks at risk when something goes sideways. And this storm was the snow was accumulating so quickly that I think everyone on the road was at risk during it. So that was really what led to it. Typically, in any climate event that we have like this, certainly hurricanes, that tends to be true for all of it. We don't look to open comfort centers until after the event is over, because we do not want to put people in harm's way in terms of getting them on the road to one of those centers. So that tends to be how we handle things. That's from my understanding, an emergency management best practice. And I'm no expert, Adam. I would definitely defer to our EMC, Steve, on that. But certainly that's been our practice. And but like I said, there's always more we can learn from that. And so hopefully we'll, during I'm sure we will have a debrief on this. We've got an the municipal emergency management committee that will have this discussion in more depth, and we're always reevaluating those practices. So happy to hear from anybody who may have different opinion or some information that they could share to help improve practices. We need to be looking at continuous improvement all the time, because we're going to get more of these events, not fewer of them.
What do you personally take away from an event like this? And I mean, we may have covered this already during the course of the interview, but is there anything else that you like to add about what you, as not only the warden and the counselor, but also just as a resident of Richmond County, experienced during this kind of a snowstorm that came in waves, that is still feeling its impact as we go? Just basically, what do you take away from all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I know you've heard it from me before, and I sound like a broken record, but it's the people who rush in to help that, the volunteers who could stay home and safe and snug as a bug in their houses with their families, and they rush instead out of their homes to help people and shovel and push cars, and they do what they need to do to help people get back on track. And I always find that when you reflect on these situations, it's almost a little bit overwhelming, because there's less than 9,000 people left in Richmond County, but there still never seems to be any shortage of people out there who are willing to help and help things get back on track. There is a level of caring, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I would say the other thing that is that this storm in particular has left me with is, you know, like I said, I don't think we can expect fewer of these types of weather events. We need to be very, I think, conscious of the fact that it's probably going to continue to increase in intensity for the foreseeable future. So that's going to mean that we have to have some hard conversations about, around, keeping people safe and budget time, and what do we need to invest in, not just municipally, but provincially, federally. How are we mobilizing, and how do we make sure that our most vulnerable citizens are more connected, I guess I would say, to the recovery process, right? And So I, definitely plan to be having more discussion on, vulnerable persons registries, that type of thing, because we definitely have some room for improvement there.
All right. Well, there's a lot to unpack. Some would say a lot to shovel out in terms of a story like this and a storm like this. But we appreciate you taking some time and going through all of this with us. Warden Mombourquette, thank you for joining us once again here on Telile 24/7.
Thank you, Adam. Happy to be here.
Amanda Mombourquette is the Warden of Richmond County and the Councillor for District 4. We've been speaking to her at her home office in Grande-Greve today.